Long ago, back in 2003, I was tasked with the opportunity to shoot the war in Iraq. The Allied Forces' mission was to facilitate regime collapse and restore freedom to the Iraqi people. That war would become Operation Iraqi Freedom, lasting for almost 9 years and coincide with the war in Afghanistan, the longest war in U.S. history. I am your host, Sean Fairburn. I was a Chief Warrant Officer in the United States Marine Corps. My job was as a combat camera officer, tasked by the Commandant to shoot the war. Making my way down the chain of command to determine the best place to be to accomplish that mission, I decided that the lead ground combat element in the middle of the fighting would be the most logical place to tell the Marine Corps story from the ground. That decision led me to Delta Company, 1st Tank Battalion, Regimental Combat Team 7, 1st Marine Division, 1st Marine Expeditionary Force. I was introduced to then Captain Greg Poland, Commanding Officer of Delta Company, 1st Tanks. This provided me a way to be close to the fighting with tanks, infantry from Lima Company 3-4, and Charlie Company Combat Engineers. A vantage point of the war that would prove to become historic, as you will see. This will become the foundation of a podcast documentary series that talks with some of the Marines from these units to hear their stories and see where they are now and what God is doing in their lives since coming home from the battle. Next up, Master Sergeant Erik Benitez, another legend in the tank community. Erik was the Battalion Master Gunner, which is the wingman for 1st Tank's Battalion Commander, Lieutenant Colonel Jim Chartier, and Tank Commander of Big Ol' Naugus. This would be his crew's first time in combat, going into battle in 2003 for the longest inland tank march in Marine Corps history. Erik, great to see you.
It's great seeing you, Sean.
All right, so what was the last unit that you were in before you got out of the Marine Corps?
PM Tanks. Yep. So out of Marine Corps Systems Command, where my final duty, which kind of was my bridge over to what I'm doing now, which was providing upgrades, enhancing firepower for the tank. Because once we had left the invasion, they moved me over to training. So I was training, and then I went over to PM Tanks to where they were leveraging my technical expertise more. So, providing upgrades to tanks and everything as we all thought when we left originally when we were done. But obviously we know now that we had to return back, and then as the enemy had improved its fighting capability, we had to improve the abilities of the tank to better equip them.
So what was your job title at PM Tanks?
So I did that as a Marine. So it was a combination of a Marine civilian team. At that time, I was I went there as a gunnery sergeant, and then promoted to Master Sergeant while I was there for that. And so that was so I was a project officer, and actually probably most of my time was new equipment training team lead. So most of my job during that last 3 years was taking this new equipment and some of the new advances in firepower and going actually out to Iraq to the 4 deployed units. I would put it on their tank, train them that night, and then literally that next morning they would head back out on patrol. So that was pretty interesting because at that point in time, tank platoons were dispersed all over Iraq. So then I would get a chance to go through and from platoon to platoon in a small tank community. Obviously, I know every single platoon sergeant that's out there at the time. So at that point we had served together at one point or another. So it was kind of a great opportunity not only to bring a new technology, improve their fighting capability, but at the same time do a health check on a lot of my brothers, because a lot of times if you have one platoon in Fallujah, that means you got one staff NCO there. So as far as he doesn't have another tank staff NCO peer. He has a lieutenant. And then he has probably a sergeant. But as far as a peer, another staff NCO who's who's a tank guy, he doesn't have that. So that was really what was great about, that I did 2 tours in Iraq in that, wearing the hat of new equipment training and fielding. So it was really good. And a lot of those, many of those guys were my best friends. So it allowed me to deal with the jealousy that they were there. And I got trapped in this acquisitions billet where I didn't get a chance to, to return and do what they were doing. They were living the dream while I was caged. But it was a good chance to go out there and actually spend some time. And then by doing that, I got a chance to see how differently the Marines lived, from our time there, and where we lived on the tank. There was you lived on the tank, and to later in the years as we started closing down Iraq, where you did have these mini villages built in these FOBs, where so even though I never really had to live in what we used to call the cans in Iraq, I definitely spent many a times there as I bounced from camp to camp and got a chance to see them, and then of course at the same time utilize those back in the day stories, like when I was here doing this, my bed wasn't a mattress, my bed was next to the sponson box, on top of the tank. So but I got a chance to share and see how the living standards and the for the Marines and the sailors that were there, how it had changed over that I guess 7-year period, 2003, to 2010. I was there with them and get a chance to meet back. So no, that was what was so that was my long way around. Yeah, so I did acquisitions project officer at PM Tanks, and that was my final 3 years.
So, as a tiny aside, so what do you think about the Marine Corps getting rid of tanks?
So in 2020, the Marine Corps decided to reshape its way it's gonna fight, and that obviously to get the gains that you wanted, there obviously had to be some losses. One of those losses was tanks and tank recovery. I believe that the generals and the people above us are this was an educated decision. I hope we don't find out, like I said, that I hope we don't find out that it was a bad decision that we find this out in blood. I do believe tanks are required. I might be a little biased, but I do believe that a tank brings much more to the fight than the big boom. It's deterrence. It is there is no better quick reaction force than a section of tanks. And this is definitely proven. Whether it's a squad of Marines that are pinned down, Amtrackers, LAV, it doesn't matter. You bring 2 tanks from anywhere, and you don't have to fight because everyone leaves. It is a deterrence. That just the projection of power deters the enemy from continuing wanting to fight, and that's good. But obviously, at that time, the commandant had to make some decisions. Yes, we are the biggest, we are the heaviest, and I'm sure he didn't come to that decision easily either. I just hope he doesn't regret it, with lives on their hands. And let's hope we never have to prove it again over time. But if we do, I really hope if they need us, that there's enough old guys around like me to help the new generation to get themselves proficient and ready to fight. Because any one of us is willing to stop what we're doing and jump on that mission right now to prepare, those younger Marines if that's asked for.
So, since you hung up the uniform, but not to let go of the momentum and let go of the skill set of decades of amazing time in tanks, what does life look like for Erik Benitez now?
Life for Erik Benitez, from the work side, is I'm still serving 13 years in the job that, let's just say, the Marine Corps made a deal that I couldn't refuse. And in a job as a civil servant, continuing to serve our country and specifically our Marine Corps, not in tanks, but in the amphibious fighting vehicle realm. There is no Marine Corps. There is a Marine Corps exists without tanks. A Marine Corps does not exist without a forcible entry platform from the sea. So I find myself in that world now with a lot of similarities. Tanks and Amtraks were both heavy junk. We're both heavy, big boys. So a lot of that translated, with the Marine Corps' plan to upgrade that vehicle that had been around, since the 70s. I found myself, initially when I joined this amphibious team, it was for my firepower expertise. Since then, I have now transitioned over to the amphibious combat vehicle, which is an upgrade. It's a complete vehicle upgrade. There is no similarities between the legacy vehicle, the AAV, and the amphibious combat vehicle. One was track, one was wheels. One had this weird gun system. This one has a remote fire control system. The only commonality is that they carry our Marines into the fight and that they swim. And so that's about that's where I find myself now. I am the director for the amphibious combat vehicle new equipment training. So that's where that's where I hang my hat and my responsibility. Have a team of 1/3 active duty Marines, and then the other other 2/3 are support contractors as instructors. But the one commonality amongst them all, they're all Marines. So they either served in the Marine Corps as Amtrackers or combat. We've come to realize even other MOS densities that we've brought them in, and we're leveraging their expertise, and it's become quite a good team of about 40 personnel. And then what's great for me, obviously, is what do you miss about the Marine Corps when you leave, right? You miss the camaraderie in the Marines. You miss those Monday stories, after the weekend stuff. I'm fortunate enough that I still get that. I still have, young Marines. I have young NCOs, staff NCOs, officers. And then, so I do get that current, where are the Marines now? Because the Marines now are a different Marine than when we were in. And we, even us as old guys, have to evolve and understand that the younger generation, they have expectations. They want to know the whys and the hows. Where some of us in the olds, we didn't need that. We just needed direction. Give me a heading, and then we'll go forward and do great things. So it's been allowed me to not only understand this new generation, the adult learning that so that's where I'm at right now. So we're in the middle of fielding this new vehicle. And so, and again, a lot of lessons learned, and continuing to hopefully increase the Marine Corps' firepower. It's not tanks, but I guess it's the closest thing the Marine Corps has right now. So I'm excited. I'm happy with my job. Been there 13 years, and not many people can say that, that the reason that they transitioned, that they're still in that position. And I'm very blessed that I haven't had to experience a lot of, bouncing from one job to another. Those struggles. I'm proud to say I've never had to stand an interview for a job. Coming out of high school, my interview was a recruiter. Coming out of the Marine Corps, my interview was with a full bird colonel standing in my PT gear saying, him asking me, what do you think? I'm like, I think that sounds like a good idea. And it was like, okay. I'm like, am I going to see this in paper? Am I going to get an offer? And it was funny. He's like, I'm a Marine. We do it by a handshake. And I'm like, okay. I'm making a big decision on a handshake, but that's what a Marine does. And obviously at that time, Colonel Moore, who was the program manager for the Expeditionary Fighting Vehicle program, that's all I needed. So as far as that's where I am professionally, personally.
Yeah. Tell me about the family life. Like what is going on now with the kids and your relationship with your amazing wife and what God is doing in your life?
I'm very blessed that my job does allow me to be, people always ask me why did I get out just at 20? At that point, I realized, at that point it was, my son was born, and I realized that there was one thing better than being a tank commander, and that was being a father. Unfortunately for my daughters, they didn't flip that switch that was so great, but I realized that my son needed a male role model, a man, and a man at the house, and I just realized how much I enjoyed actually being a father, and so that's what drove my decision. So I'm married to my beautiful wife, Erik Benitez, and she has blessed me with 5 children. I got 4 daughters, 1 son. What a lot of people don't realize is that I also have 4 foster children. So at one point in my house, there was 9 children living in my house. So when people ask me how many kids do I have, I actually, for real, I have 9. I have 9 children. It was, and that was just, again, I think, God put in me where in a place, I had identified, I was a football coach, and a lot of people, make fun of me. It's like that this was the, the real world blind side, living the blind side. And I recognize that we did have some. There's obviously people on the playing field that aren't as fortunate, especially my children. Been very blessed, from financially, from where I've been able to fill the, allow them to chase their dreams. I did identify that there was one player that my son had played football with for, since they were 5 and 6 years old, and always knew that I can read those tea leaves and understand that they had obviously come from a different social class and tried to be there for them, but eventually got to the point where once the state was going to remove them from their home, that I needed to step in, and it wasn't just for one of them, it was for all 4. So that was 3 boys, and so I was able to flip the script on the household, the way the household is, kind of step up the boy group, the kind of balancing out the testosterone in the house, with my boys. So today, I mean, I'm still in contact with 2 out of the 4 of those pretty regularly. Just last weekend had my boy Patrick was over at the house, and he's 18, graduating this year, and we had the Fosters. Either they aged out when they turned 18, or after about 6.5 years. I was happy that that it doesn't happen often that mom and dad were able to demonstrate their ability and prove to the state that they could have their children back. So the younger 2 did go back. That was hard. I mean, 6 years in our house, and I didn't raise them any differently than my own. That was tough. It was a lot of tears on both sides, a lot of anger. Right. I mean, because now you're taking, children out of my home, in which, in my belief, my standard is not the state standard. And, I wanted to give, these 4 children an opportunity to succeed, and what is called privileged, which is opportunity. And I wanted to give them the opportunity. I grew up in a very, very low income environment, and I wanted to demonstrate that, it's not easy, but it is doable. And so, and for the most part, they're all doing pretty well. And so, they would, every once in a while they need to be kicked in the butt by me, and I'm still influencing their lives, whether they like it or not.
So obviously you don't go by that decision all by yourself. You coordinate this kind of activity with your favorite teammate, your wife. So how did that work out?
So my wife's an animal lover. So the story in Fallbrook where we live is she collects animals, I collect children. She read me instantly when a very solemn moment when Child Protective Services and the police showed up to our house, which is where the children and the mom was staying after some domestic violence issues. And witnessing children being ripped from a crying mother's hands, because of her decisions. But I don't take that away. I'm happy that that we do have those services to protect the children, especially when parents aren't there to do that. And witnessing this and watching this, being and also experiencing it as a young child, I had to leave, being taken from my mom. I'm watching 4 of them, it happened to 4 children, kind of starting to see behind the curtain what was actually happening, because I didn't realize what was happening with this family, and then, so when I asked the officer, I'm like, well, you're going to take them, but you're going to keep all 4 together. And the social worker said, unfortunately, that's not going to happen. Right. And I was like, well, probably the only constant goodness in their life after starting to learn what was going on is the 4 of them. So then I was like, well, don't go anywhere. And I looked at my wife and I said, babe, we got to go talk. And as soon as we went to the other room, she goes, you want to keep them. And I'm like, much like, you find a stray dog. I'm like, well, I don't know what keep them means. But as of right now, allowing them to be ripped from their arms right this second in front of me, I said, that's not going to happen. So she's like, well, you do what you do. So then I walk back in. I'm like, okay, so I don't know what's going on now. I can tell you, you're not taking the 4 kids right this second. If they need to go somewhere, I will take them there and help them get through this process. But in the meantime, I need to find out what does it take for them to just stay with me. And the social worker was shocked. I mean, and I just, that we are willing to do that. And she's like, there's a process or whatever. I'm like, I'm a good dude. I got whatever secret clearance you need. I go, it's not going to take long before you realize that this is a loving home. But the fact is, you're not taking them. I go, you're more than welcome to ride with me or go with me. But I said, I will get them where they need to be for this next step. And that's how it happened. That the wife never really pushed back on it. Would we do it again? I would like to say yes, we would. But it was not easy. It was challenging. We converted every room in our house, into a bedroom, because we were living in a normal 3-bedroom house. We had 5 children already living in there. So, living like a normal American family. And now we had 9 the next day. And of course they didn't come with anything. So, it bled everything we had, all our savings, but we wanted to make sure that, at no point that they feel any different in our house. And it wasn't long. It took about 2 weeks before they stayed with us the whole time. And then about 2 weeks later, the state was just like, okay, you guys are good. And we thought, going into it, that it was short. This parent just hit rock bottom. There could be nothing worse than losing your children, So we figured that this might be 6 months, 6 years later, I was like, wow, and so,
Did you have a church family involved to kind of help with?
No, we had a family. It was the sports community, because one thing is mainly my wife. But we've always pushed that.
What age were they?
So when we tell that, let's see, Ramesses had to be 5. Patrick was probably, the twins' age, so 8. And then Nevaeh, she was the girl. She was in 7th or 8th grade, so she had to be about 11. And then Michael, the oldest, he was a junior or a sophomore in high school when we first got them. But none of them had been in school in a long time. So there was a lot of reestablishing some norms in regards to, not only, the living, but also, living life and life lessons, but also from the educational standpoint.
And when that happened, you were still in the Marine Corps, right?
No, I was pretty much right after I got out.
Oh, okay.
So this was right after I got out.
And you were coaching as well?
At that time I was coaching. I started transitioning from coaching. I had realized really early on, me as a coach, I couldn't separate being a coach and a dad. Much like for my 2 oldest daughters, I could not find a happy medium between being a Marine and being a dad. In that environment, I chose being a Marine, and I raised them as they will tell me, as Marines. I started finding myself as when my children start walking through the door and calling me coach instead of dad. That was a problem for me. So it was right around that time I stepped back from coaching and went into more management. So I started, president of Pop Warner. President of rugby clubs and stuff like that, and stepping away from actually being the actual coach in their life, and then being more the nurturer and the provider of their sports, and not just them, but other children. I found out that my that my skill set was much better used not on the field, but getting and supporting those kids while they're on the field, and then that's where I thrived and I lived. And it's actually quite a blessing, because I got a chance to really not only affect and be a part of just that that team's life. It was the entire league's life of all those children. And so today, I mean, it's, I can't walk around. Now, they all still call me coach, but I feel like I more coached life lessons than I did any kind of skill set on the field. So
obviously, we're different people when we come home from combat, and we have different expectations, and we have a professionalism within the Marine Corps when we're surrounded by other Marines who are, performing at a very different level. So one of the things that I found pretty difficult was the ability to talk to my kids or talk to my coworkers or talk to people I was working with, even on movie sets, and not have a level of expectation that I was talking to a Marine on the battlefield or a Marine in any other kind of professional setting, where there was an expectation of professionalism, an expectation of having a willingness to get something done. How did you approach that? I mean, for me, it forced me to rethink a level of softness and, let's say, explain things a little bit more, add in the why behind what I needed to have happen rather than just expect it to happen by asking for it directly. How did you?
I guess I came back from another deployment in Quantico, and had a great neighbor, combat veteran as well, infantryman. He was a first sergeant, and I was a master sergeant at that time. And I always looked at him like, man, you're pretty hard on your kids. Like, oh man, dude, never had the courage to say anything about it. But I watched wow, this guy, he's pretty rough on his kids. I came back from the deployment, and experiencing what a lot of it is, your kids no longer recognize you, right? You try to grab them, they're young. They don't want you to hold them because you're a stranger. But right back, I'm back home, back to work. And then I guess my moment was this first sergeant I think it was on a Friday night. He approached me and he said, why don't your family come stay with my family for a couple of weeks? And I'm like, I'm here. Why would you do that? He goes, to Billy Bain, dude, you're an asshole. And here's someone that I'm looking at that I think, no, you're the one who's bad. And he was the one who said, I might be bad, but not like you. And that was my moment. That was my moment that I had to step back and look in the mirror and and decide, am I that guy? Am I him? Yeah, I was. And so that was my moment that I decided to get help, while I was in the Marine Corps. And I fortunately they've I've probably not. I'm not saying I'm fixed. I'm definitely not fixed. As one of my tanker brothers tell me, I've only put a Band-Aid on the problem with med. That there's a way to fix it, but that's got to be my decision to take that next step. But in the interim, the Band-Aid works. Every once in a while, I'll rip that Band-Aid off and think I don't need it, and my wife has no problem telling me. She knows. She can tell when I'm not acting right, and no one knows better than your loved one right there. And she can tell me, she was like, I don't have to go through your bottles to see if you're taking them. She goes, I can just tell. And so that was my moment. And that was, I guess now 16 years ago I've been on it, but I don't know I don't think it was combat that changed. This is my when it comes to PTSD, right? I can't remember one thing that happened, that was a moment that, but what I can tell that changed is as expectations of excellence. At no point would I allow our guys to deploy and not be prepared. And not be prepared is simply automatic response to orders, do what I say, and this is how you'll survive. I guess that's the part I brought home. Again, I've been blessed that I haven't had to plug holes in bodies with my hands and my fingers. But I do know, and I have witnessed, by not doing your job and performing at a certain level, that causes holes in bodies. And so I brought that home. And so that's where, again, so have I gotten rid of that expectation of excellence and demand of perfection? Probably not. But the Band-Aid has helped me to maybe approach it and think about how I'm going to get that excellence and that perfection out of them without, let's just say, grabbing them by the scruff of the neck and making them do it. I'm trying to definitely a softer approach to it.
So one of the things that was kind of a challenge for me was when I took the job, basically, to be a combat camera officer and to take my skill set working in Hollywood onto the battlefield. I was already a Desert Storm veteran, but at the same time, I now was going, my primary job, not my secondary job, because in Desert Storm, I was a gunner on an LAV. So in Operation Iraqi Freedom, my job was as a combat camera officer, bring a camera onto the battlefield. And so the level of difficulty, the level of challenge, the level of preparation and attention to detail was obviously very important to be able to make sure I had all my gear right and everything was good to go. But when I got home afterwards, it was very hard for me to tear those two things apart. I then brought that work and that work ethic and the sort of high expectation of life and death that the battlefield presents to us, and I added that to my camera work. And that was, really hard. It was hard for me because I had a different way of speaking. And just like your first sergeant, I had a Navy SEAL buddy named Richard Ball, phenomenally talented key grip. And he had to pull me aside. We were working on a feature film one day, and he's like, "Sean, you can't talk to them like that. They're not Marines. You can't hold them to that level of expectation." And I started to defend myself. I'm like, dude, it's just professionalism. They need to show up where I tell them to show up and get the gear together the way that it needs to be set up. And he's like, yeah, I get it, but they're not that way. They're a different generation. They do things differently. You got to figure out another way to talk to them. And he's actually the one that suggested that I get help and go talk to somebody else about how I was dealing with things. And so one of the things, I had to walk away from the industry. I had to get away from the industry entirely and pick up woodworking. And woodworking became the thing that I decided to become a professional dad and teach my kids something that I did not have mastery in. I was not a woodworker, but I decided that we are going to learn woodworking together. And together, we're going to walk through a whole new thing where I get to be fascinated by something as I learn, and I get to do it with my kids. And so that changed the way that I approached pretty much everything else. Everything had to kind of slow down, and I had to become a better version of myself by really understanding that I'm not on the battlefield anymore. Everything we do is not life or death anymore. The gear needs to be taken care of, but it doesn't need to be taken care of to the degree that it once did when lives were on the line for every single piece of gear. So how did you?
Yeah, I don't think I've found nirvana of being the best dad yet. I can tell you, I do give it that 100%, that 100% effort. I am very happy that my three younger children never got a chance to even at the minuscule level really experience what my two older daughters had to deal with. And my older daughters will definitely tell my children that are their siblings all the time, the dad you have is not the dad we have. See, then we had the gunny, is what they would say. We had the gunny. He wasn't a dad. He was the gunny. He goes, and they're like, even my older children have a hard time wrapping their hands around the different approach that I've taken to raising their younger siblings. And they will throw them at us, well, why do they get to do this? Why do they get to do that? Why do they get, when I was their age, there was no, well, when you were their age, you weren't allowed. I understand you weren't allowed to do anything, you know. But I think it's always funny that, you know, and I'm blessed. Funny, you know, I do wish my three younger ones would have had a chance to learn and see the Marine Corps that made me who I am today. The good part of me, you know, not that ugly part, but the good part. Because my older daughters grew up around the Marine Corps. You know, they've been and seen Marine Corps balls. They've seen Dad walk out in his dress blues, you know, where, you know, they look like, you know, Dad's a prince, you know, because I'm looking pretty good. I don't think, you know, my three younger ones have ever seen me in a uniform in real life. And I told them the only way that I'm putting this body back into a uniform would be, you know, the day any of them stand on the yellow footprints, you know, and that would, you know, that would encourage me to get down to some fighting weight, and because I'm not willing to go buy a new set of uniforms, so I'd have to get back down to that fighting weight. But if they're willing to go that extra, yeah, willing to shave, definitely going to willing to shave. Though I think this mustache would look great in a set of dress blues. But I do wish that my three younger ones, especially my son, got a chance to see me in uniform. We have plenty of pictures when he was a little fella on a tank, you know, being that his name is Tank. But it's funny to reflect back in the 2020 decision of getting rid of tanks. My son had always was his plan was to be a Marine Corps tanker, and so that decision not only affected, you know that ripple effect to him was, well, what am I going to do, Dad? I'm like, well, you still got a lot of great jobs in the Marine Corps, and he goes, but Dad, it's not on a tank. I'm like, you're right, it's not on a tank. And I go out, and if you ask me, join the Marine Corps or join the Army, go be on a tank, I'm gonna have to go to our brothers in the tanks, because I mean, there is nothing cooler than being on a tank and being a tank crewman. So, but he can't. I have an easier time getting over the idea of him being a soldier than he has the idea that him being a soldier. So, and that's the right answer. I mean, if you're going to join the Marine Corps, why do you want to do it? It's to be a Marine. That should be your first decision. If it's not that answer, go find employment elsewhere.
So one of the nice things about you being Dad is that you also have a family of rugby players and football players, and you've got kids that are engaged in sports, and you see that difference. And I'm sure you have this kind of conversation on a regular basis where there's an expectation as a Marine, and what difficulty looks like is a very different definition to non-Marines. And so the way that we approach challenge, the way that we approach obstacles, the way that we approach things in life that might be viewed as being very, very dangerous is different than other people. And so when you teach determination, or when you are giving a level of sort of pep talk or coaching, a coachable moment, whether as Dad or actually as a coach, that's a little bit different when you're coming at it from a different perspective as a Marine. So part of, when you allow your kids to be able to take on a lesser role, or the opportunity to say, kind of like that Rocky moment where you're better than that. You can do greater things than you realize that you can. And you're able to put them into a place where the obstacles in their life are going to be many, and they're going to be throughout your life. But how you approach it, how do you run to the sound of the guns and decide, I intend to get engaged here. I don't intend to run and hide and hope that nobody finds me. And that's kind of an approach to life that many people miss. So what is your approach, and how do you have those conversations?
Well, I guess it started even before the Marine Corps with me, with my mom. Like I said, I did grow up in a low income, and it was a battle, it was a struggle. But she had always told me, that God will never give me more than I can handle. He didn't promise it'd be easy, but that would never give me more than I can handle. So going in life, I guess that really resonated with me. And then going into the Marine Corps showed me there will always be obstacles, but there's always a solution around it. You can go around it, through it, over it, under. But with every problem, with every obstacle, there's a solution. That's where the decision making comes into place, and and what you're willing to risk to go to go around that obstacle. And so I guess that's where it was kind of my mom planted the seed. The Marine Corps showed me a process to do it. And so I guess for when it comes to my children, how do I apply this? It's trying to drive home the two things. One, that again, from the spiritual side of it, the faithful side, that God's never have faith in God that He's not going to give you more than you can handle. No one promised it was going to be easy. I'm trying to put you in a position that your battle is easier than mine. But it doesn't mean addressing that obstacle isn't the same stress, and take the same the courage and decision making. And so showing them in the Marine Corps, taking what I learned in the Marine Corps, and when they have achieved something that wasn't easy, coming back. Okay, this was a tough decision, but you see, when you first addressed it, you were a hot mess. But you made it through it. Again, there is always a way around an obstacle. It wasn't easy, and even still to this day, I guess that's probably one of the things that really helps me is I have no problem making a decision. I will make a decision, right or wrong. The worst thing you do is make no decision. And I tried to instill that really with my children. Like, if you stand there looking at a problem of making a decision, the worst thing you do is do nothing. Go with your gut feeling if that's all you have, or take the information that you have, assess it, evaluate it, and so that's where I've done it even on the field, even when it comes to the football field. Whether for my son Tank, you're on the line, you get in that 3-point stance. Okay, he's looking at you same way. We have two obstacles. You're his obstacle getting the quarterback. They're trying, and it's your obstacles to keep them from, and it comes down to, if you have someone lined up in the A gap on you or the B gap, you're in a dilemma. I mean, that situation is going to force you to make a decision at the snap of a ball, but at the same time, it's helped him, become the center on his football team, and now he is able to make those decisions to, not only is he going to assign himself, but he does assign blocking assignments on the field. I'd like to say I take a little bit of credit in that because we forced it early on. Same thing, my daughter who plays rugby, taking that ball, she's got to make a decision when she has someone, 20, 30 pounds heavier getting ready to tackle her. Well, you have a decision. You could either go through them, you can go around to the left, around the right, or you can stand there, don't make a decision, and just get smashed. And so sometimes that was learned by fire, and there was smashing. And then, the good thing is you could either sit there and get smashed and lay down and say, this is not for me, or you can get up and say, you know what, I better make a better decision, if I want to move forward. And I believe she is taking that, continue to taking that forward, because I see her decision making. It's very tough for her. It's very tough for her. So I probably ride her a little hard about her emotional intelligence, because she wears everything on. Probably, I used to do that when I was younger. Marine Corps hardened me a little bit, but I have to remind myself, and it's more my wife reminding myself. At 16, would you have the courage to tell your coach, we need to do this? Because I constantly say, hey, you need to go talk to your coach. You need to tell them, talk if this is how you feel. And then my wife's typically the one who says, would Erik Benitez at 16 have done that? Erik the Marine will do it. But will Erik the 16-year-old boy do it? And that's really helped me over the last few years, because I have an opinion on everything. There is no doubt, and I have a solution. If you're not willing to make a decision, I'll make it for you. That's the Marine things. Most recently, we're dealing with, an emergency situation with our amphibious combat vehicle. If it finds itself in the surf with Marines trapped into it, right now, we're figuring out what's the right way to recover that vehicle. I've told the master sergeant that works with me, I'm like, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to make a decision. If not, I'm grabbing a vehicle and we're going to ram it. And if that's what I have to do, that's also been my approach. Like, I want to see people make decisions. And, but again, my wife bring me back, leveling me back out. Like, would 16-year-old, would 18-year-old, would 19-year-old Marine Erik go to the corporal and say, hey, corporal, I've got this idea? Probably not. So how can I expect that out of? So that's actually been probably one of my most recently learned things, that when we're talking about children, like, regardless of how they've changed and stuff, it doesn't mean that their courage has changed, in the ability to approach, someone who's their elder or a senior or a mentor and provide advice, and even with grown-ups, either you have that machismo and that ability to go in there, there's always got to be an extrovert in the group. I'm it, you're it. I mean, that's it. I have a difficult time trying to figure out introverts, and so being extroverted is, but there's always got to be one. There's always got to be a loud one in the group. And, the problem is when there's a lot of us, then it gets really crazy.
So your relationship with her has helped you to become a better version of you. And that conscience, that little Jiminy Cricket, on your shoulder that asks the right questions to be able to guide you into maybe a slightly different way of thinking.
Well, I mean, one of the things, and I was tough on my 2 older children. I was tough on my wife, as well. And I'm blessed that she was able to stick with me. I've always asked her, why did it take that first sergeant to correct me and not you? And really, she was scared. She didn't know how. She found herself in that decision making where, do I say something that's going to make it worse? Because I think it would have, reflecting who I was back then. Do I say nothing, which it was just worse for them as well? So she was in a catch-22, but I do, even still to this day, I ask her, I cannot believe you didn't say something to me when I was that monster. But we survived it. We survived it and put us where we're at. As far as my grandchildren, wow. So I have 2 grandchildren. I have Delilah and Sage. My 2 older daughters, though, they call, they do reflect on the gunny, but they both married Marines. So when they want to give me a hard time, I always reflect back to that. I'm like, for someone who had so many problems with their dad, you both married dudes just like me. And they're like, no way, Dad. I'm like, take a look at them. Both devil dogs, both combat arms. I'm like, and now thank God they don't have they're not the gunny. They're both my son-in-laws are really good guys. Both decided to get out after 3 years. Both got out after 4 to 5 years. Both picked up sergeant, did their thing. One's living in Virginia, one's living in Georgia. My 2 grandchildren are being raised up in Virginia right now. So fortunately, my job does allow me to get out there quite a bit. I do get a chance to see them a lot more than my wife does. And so, but the great thing about technology is there is stuff like the FaceTime and stuff now. So I couldn't imagine trying to do this just over the phone. So, but no. So how do I, approach being a grandfather? I've got to get more. I got to be there. I don't know how to do more than what I'm doing right now. So at the same time, my approach to it is advice. When my dad, he wasn't really in the picture much. When growing up, he was there, but as far as being a mentor and guiding me, that was never there. Well, he tried doing that with my children, And I remember having to tell him, and it's hurt for him, just because you screwed up your chance, my kids aren't your second chance at doing it. And so I've taken the same approach with my grandchildren. Like, this is not a second chance at being, of doing it even better than I did now. No, so now I really just see it as a nurturing. I just want them to know me, know to know my wife and I, and what love, what love is, and set a good example, for them. I grew up, I always hear these great stories of people who had these grandparents, and they're like, I had my papa or my Gigi growing up. I never had that from either side of my family. So I want to give them that. So I want to be that, they call me OG, old guy. So I'm the OG. So, and they already know, Delilah's, 2 years old. And as soon as that picture picks up, she knows that that's OG, so, and then.
So obviously there was a time when you saw the writing on the wall and you knew that your unit was going to go to combat. And how did you have that conversation with Nicole? How did you break that news to her in prep, or how did it, when the balloon actually went up, what was that like? Had you already had had you already shared with her that likely expectation? I mean, she knows you're a tanker. I mean, she knows what you're involved with, and obviously you're passionate about it. This is the daily activity. But how did you let her know when it was actually time to saddle up and go to combat?
Yeah, I guess that goes all the way back to September 11th, right? Obviously, difficult for everyone in the entire United States. More difficult for a Marine or a service member because we are in a position to do something. So that waiting to respond. So how did I break it to my wife? She knew exactly how it was going to come out at me. The big payback. That's what it was. So how did I break it out? Every day it was preparing for that decision because we knew eventually we're going to have to do something. Not my timeline, obviously the president's timeline. Could not move fast enough. So my wife understood that there was no way she was going to stop that. And so when I found out, it was very happy, because now we're in a position to do something about it. Same thing is now from the testing your own mettle, right? You went to Desert Storm. I came in on literally the night of that the ground war ended. So I have spent 13 years preparing to put out a fire, to make an arrest, and have never had a chance to do it. So at the same time, we can train as hard as we want, but I just did not know, did I have what it takes, been put in a situation. I see stories on the news where people blame and judge these police officers in these horrible shootings at schools, and they degrade these police officers who choose not to run into a building where that there's active shooters on the other side of that door. You don't know if you can do that until it's time. You don't know if you can do it. And shame on anyone who judges them, because even though I have seen combat, does Erik standing on the outside of that door, knowing an active shooter's on this side, does he go through the door? There's a 99% chance I'm doing it. But again, in that situation, I don't know if I'm doing it. Neither do those. So so that was when going into combat, my first combat deployment. That would be probably one of those, no one wants, I hope never again do we ever have to fight, but I was happy to test myself and to see how I would perform in that situation. And so that's how I approach, with my wife, and it was very exciting for me to do it. And obviously I would never change it. I mean, if I was asked right now today, as much as I love my children, I'd have to lose some weight again and get back into fighting weight. But I would jump at the chance to chase that, that adrenaline, that cohesion, that life of being in that situation, because it was as I tell my children and everyone, this is the greatest time of my life. It just, and going through life knowing that you can never achieve that level of euphoria. That's what our generation struggles with right now, is that, we've lived, 7-10 years of being able to tap into that level of excitement, euphoria, aggression, and knowing that, as we sit here today, no matter what happens in our lives, nothing's going to get those juices running like the hunt of man. There's just nothing that replaces that. So, but I was happy I was able to do it and be able to test myself. And at the end, I believed in the mission, that we got a chance, to observe the living conditions, obviously, and the oppression that was with the people of Iraq. So whether the premises of how we got there, where we got that political, at the end of the day, did we do the right thing for people as mankind? Absolutely. Absolutely. That was it. Came back, was happy about it, did it honorably, and that's I guess, as I thought about this moment, you and I talking, Sean, is, what are some of the things that really, I can't remember a lot, some people have gone back to those times. I guess I've kept them pretty much closed off. But there are things that did happen, that I really reflect on. And, I guess one of those stories would be my gunner. My gunner, Sergeant Jeffries, his mom is from Iraq and his dad is from England. So he was half Iraqi. And he brought this to my attention early on when we stood up our crew, because they came from the reserves. So I really didn't have a working relationship with my tank crew early on. So I met them a little bit before we deployed, because I went out on advance party. So I did get a chance to talk to them before I told them, and I gave them my expectations. I'm like, okay, you know me from tank school instructor. Now this is tank commander. Okay, much different. Sergeant, this is, you got a few weeks before you're joining me out in Kuwait. This is what I need you to do. We'll get to know each other when we get over there. And that's when he had told me that he also speaks Arabic, Iraqi, and a dialect. And so when I talked to him, him and I talking, as differences, right? Of like, I want to do there. I'm the big payback. Like, we're here to answer question. For Sergeant Jeffries, I need to liberate my people. Wow. And hearing about, he grew up listening to stories of his mom being a Catholic, I think it's called Chaldean, in Iraq. And when Saddam took over in the 70s, she had to escape, being a Christian. So when he shared, grew up hearing those stories of the oppression of the Catholics and the Christians in Iraq. So when he's in my tank crew, now he wants to liberate his people. He wants to be the president of Iraq. And I'm looking at this young sergeant like, dude, I'm here to get my game on. We're going to do this. But then I started questioning his loyalty. Like, what happens when it's time to get it on and do some dirty work? Is he going to be there? And he was the one that told me, you don't need to worry about that. He's like, if someone needs to be put down, they're going to be put down. He goes, but we're not going through here and just shooting everyone who's brown. And, I don't think I would have done that. I would like to believe that my parents in the Marine Corps had raised me right. But that was it made an impact on me. I mean, I still think of it quite often, that him saying that to me, any idea that I would have done something that didn't keep that honor clean, right? It never even made an entry into my mind. It really didn't. There was many a times where we could have shot, but again, are they posing that threat? But when it was time for Sergeant Jeffries again to test his mettle and prove himself, he was able to perform, and there was never a problem. But the funny joke in the interesting thing about my tank crew. So like I said, my crew came out of the reserves, so out of Southern California. So there was the tank commander, Benitez. There was my driver, Gonzalez, my loader, Rodriguez. And then now we have this Iraqi fella as our gunner named Jeffries. So we changed his name. We softened up the J, put a Z on the end. We just call him Hefrez, and so he could be part of this team. Part of this team. But it was always funny. I remember the first time we apprehended someone and there was an AK-47. And obviously we don't have, most of us on this tank crew have never had a chance to handle an AK-47. And I remember Sergeant Jeffries like, let me see that. And we're looking, and all three of us looking at him, and it was like, yeah, I don't know. Well, we were disassembling our rattles. You were probably breaking this thing down because he's Iraqi, right? Because and I think we went the whole war without him letting him touch one AK-47. And it was just funny because that was just can I get a picture with it? Because everyone wants that Hollywood picture. Let me get a picture with it. And we'd look over at, Rodriguez, Gonzalez. What do you think? And they're like, nah, Gunny, threat's too high. The threat. And so even today, I'm still in contact with my crew, but especially my gunner, Sergeant Jeffries, but, and he kept my honor clean. He really did. He really did keep my honor clean. And like I said, when it was time for him to prove himself, he did, and had a great Marine Corps career. He picked up Master Gunnery Sergeant over time, and got a chance to, be there, and during the ups and downs, my struggles and his struggles, that we could, that we could, again, keep that communication between us. And it's not just via email. It's, FaceTime, picking up the phone, and do that quite.
So now it's time to take big old Naugus into battle. And what did that unit look like? And you had a very unique job within that unit. So what was your job in the unit?
Beginning with Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2003, I was assigned to 1st Tank Battalion. I had a very key billet, the battalion master gunner. There's only one of us. And in the way we are task ordered, I am the battalion commander's wingman. So Lieutenant Colonel Chartier was the battalion commander at the time. And so he has his tank and I'm his wingman, right? The most educated officer has his tank, and the most educated enlisted guy serving on a tank, and puts them together. Great combination. Surprised we did get as much action as we did, since we were surrounded really by other tank companies. So again, I was happy to be able to test my mettle, but it was when people say, weren't you scared? And I'm like, I had Delta Company, I had Charlie Company, I had Alpha Company 1-7. They had me in this protected bubble. I mean, if the enemy had made their way through Captain Poland's, band of merry men. Okay, but I know, knowing Captain Poland, knowing his officers, knowing his staff NCOs, they had a fight in their hand with that crew. I found myself in a very unique position, being with the battalion commander, being able to kind of be in his shoulder when needed, his sounding board when needed. You get to not too often that you're the wingman of a lieutenant colonel, and there's a lieutenant colonel on the gunny. The invasion was the push, right? It was the push. So we're all, we got a heading, we got a direction. I reflect back on some of the photos that you captured, and some of those times are the only times that I remember because, and I do believe it's because of the photography. It brings me back to that moment. Um, the greatest shots are those, post the sandstorm, we're stopping for fuel. I mean, so, I look at me looking like a red sugar cookie, right? But I don't, coming up to that position, I believe that's when we lost Staff Sergeant May during that time. And when they said, once we found out what happened to Big Donald, they're like, he went off a bridge. And I'm like, what bridge? I don't remember going over a bridge. The Euphrates? That's a pretty big drink of water. I would assume it'd be like going over Coronado Bridge. I would think I would remember this. And so when I started asking my crew, and they're like, not Gunny, I don't. I mean, it was just, but it's those pictured moments that bring me back to that moment. But as the battalion master gunner, as a lot of times the colonel would want to let's go visit Alpha Company. They're detached. Let's go visit Bravo Company. So he's going over there. He's checking on his officers, right? Checking on the platoon. I get a chance to check in with my staff NCOs, and get with that tank leader. And then even more importantly, get with those platoon sergeants. And I know they're wrapped up around the fight right there. I'm coming in when was the last time you bore sighted your tanks? When was the last time you checked on your fire control system? I mean, really, right now you have an opportunity. You have a known distance. You have a defined point. Let's do a quick bore sight on all the tanks. You have this, and kind of just get them out of for one things. They're focused on the fight. Maybe by doing this one little technique, get their mind off it for a moment. But again, all these platoon sergeants, whether it's Gunnery Sergeant Heath, again, a best friend, I get a chance to see him and then check on him. Master Sergeant Mummy, my mentor, he would come see me. I mean, Top Mummy never had a reason to come see me. I'm with the battalion commander. He's out there doing God's work, making sure everyone has their ammo and fuel and everything. But, when Mumbo walks up to you and is like, Eric, hands me a cup of coffee, how you doing? I need that too. For me, it goes no surprise. The sun raises and sets on Top Mummy. There has been and will there never be another mentor professional Marine like that. And even still to this day, Mike Mummy and I are still great good friends. Still makes my knees get a little scary every once in a while I come around them. And even my kids who didn't know me as a Marine know the stories of Top Mummy. The Marines I work with today know the stories of Top Mummy. But yeah, that was what was really unique about my job, during the combat was I got a chance to go around very much like when I ended up being at Syscom, when I had to go out and go to these different platoons. I almost served the same role. We went and saw Bravo Company after Gonzo. When Gonzo lost his life, over at the hospital, and he got shot, just a straight shot through, the miracle bullet, right? I remember the boss man going, "Hey, Colonel Chartier, we need to go check on Bravo," because that was our, since we had lost Donald and his crew, that was the next time that we had to deal with a loss in Tank Battalion. So, I remember going there, and this time was a lot more, because now we're, they're in Baghdad, but they're together as a company, operating out, platoons going on, but everyone's together. We didn't have that as a unit when Staff Sergeant May went down, because we're on the push, we're moving up, Delta Company's out, you still had the mission. With Bravo Company, when we lost Gonzo, everyone was there. That was the first time you saw the Marine Memorial, the cross with the boots. First time seeing that, oh crap, and seeing that's where Gonzo got shot while guarding the gate, and getting a chance to talk to those staff NCOs and how it affected them. Because everyone was together to share it. With Staff Sergeant May, we didn't have that chance. It was once we realized and were notified what happened to Don and his crew, we had a very short time to think about it, and then really, and I remember talking to the colonel the day when we found out, that we lost Staff Sergeant May and his crew, and I saw the colonel, obviously colonel being one of the first notified in the battalion, so I walked over there, and he broke out that cigar, and and him looking at me, he's like, Gunny, I just wanted to bring everyone back. And I'm sure, not being an officer, of course we want to bring everyone back. But I'm sure every officer that deploys in a combat situation, their number one thing they want to do, as much as we want to say is the mission, no, we want to bring everyone back. And in that moment, he failed his, and it took years, for every commander that served. Unfortunately, I'm not sure of any unit who didn't take a loss in one way or another, and every one of those commanders had to be there for it, and I was happy I was there with the colonel. Didn't have much to say, just lit up a stogie with him, and we just sat there, and then as time went on, then we start talking about some stories of Don, and and then same thing, and then when I'd go to Bravo Company. Staff would be, hey, have you been to Charlie Company? How are they doing since Staff Sergeant May went down? And I'm like, they're stepping up, got a new platoon sergeant going in, stuff like that. So I was able to be there and then share that communication between companies. If I just got done visiting Alpha Company, I can go talk to someone from Bravo and be like, yeah, I just came from Alpha, man. Hey, Jim Aurelio told me to give you a good game. Bam! And pass that communication love, because we didn't get a chance to see each other till we got back. Till we got back to what was it? I don't even know where, Diwania or something like that, where we kind of brought the whole battalion back together, and and kind of got a chance to it wasn't even sharing war stories, just sharing being back with each other and picking up as if like we just didn't do a great thing. It was it was the same conversations and the same stories that we did back in 2005. It was just kind of back to being that brotherhood and friendship, but definitely now baptized in blood, and so that was my job.
So, as you know, the bridge crossing at the Diyala River was a key factor in the effort to facilitate regime collapse and to get into Baghdad. And obviously it was a feign at first, and the whole goal was to draw fire into that position. But you had a front row seat. I got footage of your tank literally stacked up right there on the front row, right on the sidelines, right on the edge of the river, getting to watch in an overwatch position. But it had been there, we had the firefight the day before, line charges to get to that position. Then we had the all-night firefight with all the air, the Helos flying in, the Hueys gunships, the Cobras flying in. And then the next day, the lieutenant from Lima Company 3-4, I think it was the XO, turned around and said, hey, sir, we got the momentum. We should take this bridge. And that just, called an audible, changed everything. But again, you're right there. And at the time, Matt Ufford, who kind of made this same point, wait, what? We're going to step across this thing on an AVLB over a hole in the bridge that we don't even really understand yet how big this hole is from our vantage point. We can't quite tell if this is even going to work out. So, your position, and up to that point, tanks don't swim. And the only other tank crew that had been lost up to that point went off into the Euphrates River. So, the Matt Ufford had a little radio traffic with Greg Poland, and Greg, just trying to make a joke, lighten the mood a little bit, said, hey, I hope all your guys are swim called. Well, Matt did not like that comment. Matt kind of took offense to that. And, kind of rightfully so. I mean, I can understand his position, but Matt took his tank and he was going to be the first one across. So if anybody was going to go in the water, it was going to be Matt's tank. So Lieutenant Matt Ufford of 2nd Platoon Delta Company, First Tanks, was going to step over, and if it was going to go down, it was going to go down with his tank. So, I mean, this was a pretty amazing thing. I mean, obviously it was a feint at the front end, but at the same time, it transitioned. And when everybody said, "Hey, now it's time to go and get across the bridge and draw enemy fire from up and down the whole river," it was going to be a fit. Be able to get into that position. What did that look like for you? I mean, you had front row seats to all that.
Well, I find this question interesting because, Colonel Chartier asked me the same thing. How in the hell did you find yourself up on that bridge providing, support by fire position on top? I'm the battalion commander's wingman. He steps away to go talk to the COC to kind of draw up what this plan is. So I didn't understand all the big picture of what was going on, because as we pulled into we hit this position after the full night of just exciting, spectacular American power, then we realized, there's a bridge, half of it's gone. We do know that the personnel down to our south or west, they're building the floating bridge, getting ready to do their feint and all this stuff, and we're looking at this bridge, and then there's a lot of crap across that. Tanks are still firing and shooting at. And then up on the bridge, on this bridge, I see we got two tanks. Sergeant Penyak and the platoon sergeant, Gunnery Sergeant Heath. And obviously they're sitting up on this bridge, king of the world. Could not imagine two better guys to be in that position. And I get a call. I remember the call coming across the radio. Tiger Mike Golf, this is, I forget which, I don't know if he was Red 4? Yeah. Red 4 on your, on your comms. I'm like, hey, what's up, Red 4? He's like, hey, they need me back at the COC. They're making some things. He goes, I need a relief in place. And I'm like, oh yeah. I'm like, this is going to be badass. So I remember telling the crew, hey, fire it up. I remember, where are we going? It's like, we're going on the bridge. And the crew's like, what do you mean we're going on the bridge? It's like, Gunny Heath needs us to get back, do some war planning. Hey, they're calling us up. So we get up there, boom. And I remember seeing Penyak, Sergeant Penyak. Sergeant Penyak. Yeah. He, I put him through tank school, been on a MEU with him. So I know Daryl, I think I introduced Daryl to his wife. So when we were instructors in Kentucky. So I'm sitting there and, give Daryl the, what's up, my man, coming up there. And then, so we're sitting up on this bridge and, I'm trying to get a look at that hole. And I'm like, damn, that's a pretty big ass hole. I don't know, I'm like, can I get around it? I'm like, no, that's a pretty shitty hole. But we're actually on the bridge, and then, as people are starting to come towards this bridge, right? And I'm like, well, I mean, they can't do no harm to me. I'm in a tank. I'm in God's chariot right here. But, I remember, I think it was Sergeant Jeffries, like, what if they're going to blow the other half of the bridge? Then you kind of looking at it like, I don't know if the pictures do justice how exactly high that bridge was. But, I mean, I was like, oh, hell. So I'm like, so we're sitting there and, they're slowly coming towards the bridge every time. And you could see across the bridge already. You could see, I think there was a T-72 that was on fire over here. And then you could start seeing, personnel, enemy personnel that had been, whether it was from the tank fires from where this side of the water or was it from the night before. But you could definitely tell we were close enough just with the bare naked eye that you could see, But there was this old lady. Man, she kept getting a little closer to the bridge. And I'm like, well, she goes underneath there and blows the rest of this bridge. And I'm like, is that enough to put her down? And I'm just like, and then that's when I told, Sergeant Jeffries, I just lay a little scratch at her feet. Let's see if we can deter her, and it got her going, but, and eventually, we were able to start, as people advance, keep them off, keep them away. And then that's when the AVLB came off. And I'm like, oh shit, we're going to drive over the hole? And I'm like thinking, okay, so it's metal on metal. If I hit it, is it going to, I want to be the first guy over, so that way, because I'm assuming you hit that bridge, even if it's a 1-inch shove. What if you're the last guy, and you're hanging on? Because I remember them sending a guy, some engineer, which I'm combat engineer. That doesn't make him a bridge engineer. But, I could imagine that conversation back to Battalion Manor, like, yeah, we can do that. That's about probably the level of expertise. But, he made the decision. Obviously, before that was the Miklik, which, thank God you captured that. One of the greatest pictures ever known in time, right? I think I'm in the lower little right-hand corner right over here, remember feeling the heat. And I'm like, I've been definitely well within, these line charges. But to see one captured with that, I guess, when you're looking through it through a vision block, I guess you just don't realize how big the fireball really is, because I've been a plow tank many a times and been that one tank right there in front of it. But to see it in a picture, like, my goodness, that's really big, and then it's like, man, that's really badass, and then, but yeah, so, I remember just going to, I've driven across, dozens of AVLB bridges in training. Thank God, because I'd hate to be a crew to have to do that the first time on a bridge over a hole, plummet to your death. But I still remember going off, remember that bridge was made. So, the M1 a little wider. So I remember we were going, telling the driver, like, yeah, you go come left a little right. Bring a little, it's not like I can get out on the bridge and ground guide this thing over. I'm like, yeah, that looks about right. And I remember going across and just doing that lean over, like, woo, that's a pretty far way down there, right? But we went from that moment to a real moment, right? Because now we're on the far side. And, now you get to smell and really see up close the effects of what was happening on that far side of the bridge. And that was, I remember pulling over the bridge and I needed a spot, find a spot because obviously, I left my wingman over at the COC, and he came over and joined. But one thing I remember, there was just nowhere to park where there wasn't a body, right? I just couldn't, I'm trying to drive around. Like, I don't want to squish them because that's nasty. I got to work on this track. I don't want it all messy and nasty. So I'm telling the driver, like, come left. Why? There's nothing there. Oh, no, there's, there might be a foot there or something like that. I don't want that all up in my track, be smelling funky or something like that. So I finally find a position where I can be out of the way so the rest of the companies and stuff and everyone else can come across. But I'm still looking around, and as I'm looking around, it's just horrible. There's bodies here, bodies there, and I'm just like, waiting for the COC. Where am I going to put them when they come over here? I took the only good part. I took the one part where there's no messes at, But I do remember a moment that it was just a very, very solemn moment. I remember when the COC came over and the two Amtraks came over, and they had some extra officers in the command that were there. And so those cats jumped out, and these young lieutenants, and I wish I knew their name because I would throw them under the bus right now, but I can't remember. I don't remember who they were. But they jumped out and started taking pictures of all the carnage. And I'm sitting there looking at it. I don't have a camera, and I'm not taking a picture. Picture's right here, right? And I look down at this lieutenant, and he's taking a picture. I'm like, the hell are you doing, sir? I go, is that your work? I go, do you intend on going home and saying that was your work? I'm like, get your ass back in the Amtrak, and I have no pictures. Because you took all my film, Sean. So I have no photos. The only photos of the war I have is what you took for us. But I remember that moment, them jumping out and taking pictures of shit. And I'm like, dude, that's not even your work. That's not my work. And if it was my work, I sure as hell ain't going to take a picture of it, And, so fortunately, there's no film that my kids are going to run into a picture because I just don't have it. But I just remember looking like, dude, what are you doing, sir? Like, that's not even your work, and get back over there. But I remember getting on that far bridge, and that's one of the moments that I just remember just pulling in there, trying not to run over, run over dudes that, that obviously, for their own country, they did what we did. They paid, you know, just because I'm wearing red, white, and blue, I'm sure if I was in a different area, I'd be wearing a different color, I mean, and so I still understand what they're doing and respect that. But these young Thundercats jumping out and taking pictures, I'm like, dude, don't disrespect the art, the art of it. But I remember that, and I still remember that to this day. And then, and the same thing. The first time I saw a dog, trying to get a little extra chow, on bodies, and I'm just like, nah, let's hey, someone go chase that thing off, I think I pulled the 9 at one time and shot at a dog. I didn't want to shoot the dog. I still didn't want to shoot the dog. I mean, so just scare the dog off. But yeah, that was my bridge moment. It's funny because I can when me and Sergeant Paniak, we got back together, he's like, he always like, man, you took my thunder up there. I'm like, hey, you got to make a decision. You got Paniak, you got to make a decision. I went up there. I got to handle business when I went up there. So he always said on top of that bridge that I stole his thunder. But, Sergeant Paniak, he was a rock star. He was a rock star in Delta Company with that platoon. They are, Sergeant Paniak and Gunny Heath and his Lieutenant Ufford. That was a fighting machine right there. And so I was just happy, just for that little moment as the battalion master gunner to go serve alongside Sergeant Paniak in the shit. That was good. That was good. But I'll still let him know I stole that thunder because he couldn't make a decision in that moment. So, yeah, but that was my bridge. I really didn't know the big picture until when the colonel came over and, we got a chance, we get out of that crappy situation. And then he was explaining to me, I'm like, hey, sir, you really want to go up? I mean, he's like, hey, it was an opportunity. You got to make a decision, right? And he did that, and we had the advantage to keep it rolling. I think that's probably where tanks got everyone else.
So I know you had kind of a front row seat, but are you familiar with what went on the other side of the bridge? Are you familiar with what happened around that minefield on the other side and the engineers? Did you hear that story? I mean, did you know what happened?
No.
All right. So
okay.
When we got across the other side, there was, a bit of a gap, and Matt Watt, the commanding officer of Lima 3-4, he's the one that basically pointed out, like, hey, if we had done this, we would have pulled this a lot closer and made it a lot more difficult for the enemy to be able to step off of a blown bridge right into a minefield. But they gave us a lot more room. So that room was taken up by tanks once they made a footprint with Matt Ufford's platoon, 2nd Platoon, and then combat engineers came in shortly thereafter to be able to clear the minefield on the other side. Now, one of the things that was going on was, you've done this at 29 Palms. You guys do this all the time. So line charges go off 75% of the time. And that means 25% of the time they don't go off. They got to get blown manually, which is, as it's nicknamed the Medal of Honor run for a reason. That means some lance corporal, officer, it's easy to just turn around and say, hey, look, we're gonna do this, but it falls to some Marine who's going to actually have to make this happen and make this run work. So they fire a line charge out, and everybody's waiting. The staff sergeant's like, ready, and 3, 2, 1. No boom. Immediate action. They try to get it set again. 3, 2, 1. No boom. So the staff sergeant turns back down into the hold and says, hey, Marine up. We got to blow this. We got to blow this thing. And so that fell to the 2 Marines in the back of the AAV. Those 2 Marines were Joey Biancamano and Lance Corporal Baldonado. So Baldonado and Biancamano were the 2 combat engineers in the back of the AAV. Now, Baldonado was the senior junior Marine by 1 month. Biancamano was junior to him. But Baldonado and Biancamano had been arguing the whole time as to who's going to make the Medal of Honor run if they have to make a Medal of Honor run, which is kind of relatively common for that particular MOS, right? So once the order to, hey, you gotta go blow this thing up, Baldonado grabbed 2 sticks of C4, got it prepped, got it ready, and was just about to make it to leave with it, and Biancamano snatched it out of his hands and took off running. So he sprints out on the battlefield. The sergeant on the AAV says, "Hey, I need cover fire from my Marine." Well, every loader, every tank commander, every gunner is just lighting up the road on both sides of this thing to be able to keep the heads down of everybody that was gonna try to stop this Marine who's sprinting out onto the battlefield with a couple of sticks of C4. And so he runs up to the edge of the line charge, and he places it tight and touching, as he says, which is exactly what the training verbiage is. Put it tight and touching on the third accelerator charge from the back, and sprints back. Now, of course, I'm rolling on all this. I got footage of all this, and the battlefield is still lit. I mean, there's machine gun fires going off. Tanks are still engaging other targets to the left and the right, but the machine gun fire is heavy up and down the road. He comes running back. He gets right around the corner, just gets the door open, closes the hatch, and wha-boom! Man, this thing just like rocks the tanks and the Amtrak, back on their heels. And so later on, I asked him, I'm like, "Hey, so what were you thinking when you did this? I mean, this is not your job. Why did you take that job away from the Marine whose job it was?" And he said, "Well, sir,
the day we left, we had a big going away thing. We were all in our camis, our desert camis with our weapons, our gear stage, getting ready to get on the bus. We had some family time. It was the first time that I met his wife. At the time, we had no idea how we would be situated. 2 guys in the back of a kit track, doing Medal of Honor runs if it came up. We didn't know that's where we'd end up being. His wife, he brought me over to meet his wife and his son, and she shook my hand, and I met her for the first time, and she made me promise that I wouldn't let him come back hurt or dead, that I would take him back alive. So I didn't want to go back on my promise to her. I'm not married. I have no kids. I have a family in Canada, just parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, standard stuff. That's another thing. I'm Canadian, if you wanted that on camera. I'm a Canadian citizen. I'm not actually American, so if you guys lose me, it's not that big a loss. Mrs. Baldonado, Aaliyah, I fulfilled my promise to you, and I made sure your husband comes back alive to his 2 sons.
And this line charge went off, but it wasn't all the way through the minefield. Like, they still had another whole half a minefield to go. So this is where the other engineers, Bangalore's up. I mean, you remember the Bangalore runs. So the Bangalores came out, and Kirkpatrick and Cobian, these guys, I think there was a set of 4 guys that had to make these runs. So, as I call them, the Bang Boys. So they turn around, they grab the Bangalores and sprint out onto the battlefield through the gap that the line charge has already cut. And they're stacking these Bangalores into the minefield to blow another section. As they sprint back to go get more, they're completely exhausted. The next 2 run and jump out, and they sprint all the way to the rest of the thing to try to cut that next section. Well, by the time the AAV runs all the way up into the
started moving up, and there's still excess mines in the travel way. So I just hopped out again and started moving them out of the way.
And when you say you just got down and moved them out of the way, how did you move them out of the way?
I just picked them up.
Picked them up by hand?
I picked them up by hand, and the mines, they're anti-tank mines, so if it goes off, I'm not going to know the difference anyway. So I figured, what the hell? It's got to be done anyway. We couldn't use the other Miklik, so.
Why didn't you ask one of your other Marines to do that?
Because they couldn't see the mines. I mean, they could have if they got out, but it's easier for me to coordinate it with myself and the driver, because I'm in front of the vehicle and I can see everything that's going on. The reason that I didn't have them do it is because I'd never asked them to do something I wouldn't do myself, and also I knew what was going on. Instead of having them come from the back of the track disoriented and stuff, I knew exactly where I had to go and just move them out of the way, and I could do it real quick. So, and I'm told it was under fire, but that was in tunnel vision.
So he just moved him directly by himself, cleared the lane to punch through, so that everybody else in the whole unit was able to pass over the bridge and to take advantage of the wisdom of the executive officer from Lima 3-4 saying, "Hey, we got to get across this bridge. We got the momentum. We should take this bridge." I mean, what a heck of a story in all of that.
That's the brotherhood, right? You can't even, you can't even make those stories up in a movie or whatever. Like, right? That's real, right? That's real. And, obviously, being close, to your brothers, and knowing it goes well beyond just like, I know this dude because I drink beer with him in the barracks. That's knowing that, that who's at home, who's the kids, and I absolutely, it does not surprise me. It does by no means does surprise me that a Marine would do that. It doesn't surprise me a Marine would make that promise. It's a promise that we know we may not be able to keep, but we'll die trying to, right? And so that's awesome. It's great. Great. And this is the first time I actually ever heard this. I knew there was the Medal of Honor run. I knew that had to happen. Like you said, 25% of the time they don't go off, right? So someone's got to do it, but someone had to do it in that situation, which has been obviously great idea. Just hearing the, again, muscle memory and the training and going in there, because you're not trained right, you're not remembering that, right? So that's a great little tidbit of, when it comes to training and, why are we doing this? Why do we spend so many hours doing this? And it's for that one moment that you have to use it, So no, that's pretty awesome.
So the other piece of information that we got was some intel that a truck bomb was heading our way to try to stop the hemorrhaging of the Marines crossing over this bridge. So we had a pretty good description of what that truck looked like. It was a military truck. And I had my lens, and I was able to see farther down the road with the long lens on the high-definition camera than the optics would allow on the tank. So I just happened to be, kind of on the lookout for it, and I'm looking for shots, but I'm running into another problem is I'm running low on tape. And it was pretty difficult for me to know that I had to cut the camera, and I couldn't decide, it's not like the enemy is coordinating with you to say, hey, we're going to blow this up. We're going to blow this up. And in the chaos of the battlefield, I have to just, ask the Lord, hey, Lord, just guide my camera, put me where you want me to be. Let me shoot what you want me to shoot. And ultimately, I got put over onto a truck coming around the corner at a distance, and it looked like what we were expecting the truck bomb to be. So I get on the net very quickly, and I'm like, hey, we got a truck coming around the corner, and I'm trying to see who's in position who can see it. And there's brush in that island between those two roads that was pretty hard to see. I mean, it was pretty obscured from almost all the tank's position. But that truck ended up getting hit from one of the tanks, and it kind of stopped and slowly sort of pulled over. And I got I'm stopping camera, starting camera, stopping camera, starting camera to try to milk the last tape that I had to be able to shoot this in such a way that I can still capture the rest of the day's battle, which was going to be extensive. And that truck started to catch on fire. And when it started to catch on fire, the secondary started to go. Once the secondary started to go, there was a massive explosion, a huge explosion. And when that truck blew up, there was a giant ring of smoke that rolled up into the sky. And, people from miles and miles around later commented that they saw that giant ring of smoke from that truck bomb that went off. And that truck bomb had gotten stopped before it had gotten to the bridge. So whether I called it in or the guys just naturally saw it and decided to engage it, it is what it is. But what was really important for me was right after that truck bomb, I saw a yellow minivan. And that yellow minivan, from my vantage point, didn't look like it had any any guns. There's usually, there's guns that are pretty obvious to be able to see, but they were racing, and it looked like there were some hijabs, some ladies in burqas that were in the vehicle with them, and they were moving at a pretty good rate of speed, probably trying to flee what was coming. I got on the net and I said, ceasefire, ceasefire. There's a yellow minivan, heading this way. And right after that truck bomb went, there is a high likelihood that the Marines that were right there, it would have been very easy for them to take out that vehicle as well that was screaming down the road. And later, Captain Greg Poland came over and personally acknowledged, he's like, hey, I'm really glad that you were here, because this would have been a really bad day had we lit up that yellow minivan filled with women and children or non-combatants. So I'm really, really glad that you were here, which was again a tremendous blessing.
Well, absolutely. That was as much training. Like I said, 13 years, of doing I don't know how many combined arms exercises in the desert. In that one moment, it was all put together, demonstrated, and ran textbook, as we have done hundreds of times out in 29 Palms. It brought all the elements together in that one moment, and it worked. It really worked out well. And so that was again. I don't remember a lot of moments during the invasion. Obviously, that bridge was just a key moment of from the moment we got there to the moment it was just it was just awesome. It was just a really great time. And then all the Marine, everyone performed. I mean, that could have gone, there were so many opportunities for that to go south, to go bad, and it didn't. And it was, I'm sure, obviously, Captain Poland at the time, his company being that lead company right there, and Colonel Chartier, and, at that time, Major Purcell, again, Ruben Martinez. I mean, everybody on their own game, on their A game, for that one moment. And it was, I don't think, it'd have been interesting to see from the far side, like, they're like, there's no way they're coming across. Oh no, they came across. They really came across, and it was good. It was a neat moment, and the pictures that were captured from it are obviously irreplaceable. So those are a lot different. Not all of us were walking. There was no phones and digital camera and all these. It's so for most of us, our capture of that moment is what you captured. Absolutely, that's all we have, and especially at that time, that like you said, no one really had time to capture it. And then we had the combat sketch artists with us at the same time. Great. I mean, how awesome is Tank Battalion to have two. We got one guy catching it digitally, and we got Sergeant Carrillo, right? Carrillo was over there. One of the few. I don't even know how many the Marine Corps had. But he was out there, he might have been one of the most famous guys because everyone wanted their picture, sketched out from him. And he was, he was hard nosed. Like, nope, every one of these pictures belongs to the Marine Corps. They're not mine to give away. And I'm like, we were thinking, what an ass. But I just want my sketch picture. Like I was at the fair, with the big head. But no, it was really neat. And to find out that he found out himself with Tank Battalion because his brother, Sergeant Carrillo, was a tank commander, I believe, with Charlie.
So, Erik, after all that, what was it like for you coming home?
All right, well, so I guess circling around, coming off that bridge, getting back with everybody, and then coming back home, obviously, you never really leave. You bring a piece of that with you, right? You bring a piece of with it, and everyone brings a little different piece of the puzzle. I've been very fortunate, everyone's journey when they come back is going to be different. And just because it's different doesn't mean it's going to be harder. It's going to be easier. It's just different. And, and even today, I find myself dark. I still find myself going dark. And in as much communication as I have with many of my brothers, a lot, it's interesting. When I go dark, I also go quiet, and and it'll typically be a week later. I'll be on a conversation with a buddy and be like, yeah, I had a dark week. I had a bad week, last week. That's why you didn't hear from me. And, and they get mad, they get upset that's the time I should be making those phone calls. I should be calling the group and let them know, because, who else knows what, when we say, I've been in a dark place, the wife doesn't understand that. The kids don't understand, and half the time I can't understand what's wrong with me right now. I've got a great family. I got a great job. I make more money than I need. Everybody around me is happy. The hard part is, why am I not? Right? So, as I continue and then the struggle, I don't, it's a balance of faith, a balance of medication, a balance of friendship. It's all these things that it takes to really overcome, these challenges. And I don't even consider myself extreme. I have seen extreme guys. Unfortunately, we've seen them even with, the guys that were on that bridge with us. I was very, very fortunate that my transition, the Marine Corps talks about, we do a great job with the transformation. We do an excellent job sustaining that transformation. What we don't do is an excellent job at undoing that transformation. How do we send us back into public, in society, with the positive stuff, all the great stuff that, we put on that resume, what makes us great leaders, what makes us, outstanding employees and stuff. But what we don't know how to do is, you don't just get the good, you get the bad. So as I've moved forward in various mentoring roles, whether it's in my professional life, I have young Marines around me. And then of course, in my more important life, is becoming the dad, the coach, Again, I go back to what Mom said, right? God's never going to give you more than you can handle. Well, you don't have to be a man of faith to understand that life is going to throw you curveballs, right? I mean, it is, it's your, doesn't mean, you just give up on life. You just give up at, well, baseball's not my sport. No, there's another at bat. There is another at bat. So you get up there and, and you go for it and, and you swing, it goes back to, a right decision, wrong decision. Just make a decision and be able to go from there and understand that no one thing defines us. What one thing does is ending. If you choose to end, then you've made a decision no longer to try. So, I see this, people say, well, we haven't been fighting for, obviously years, right? It's been a while now since, but just because that Marine of 5, 6, 7 years and he decides to get out and he didn't see combat, doesn't mean he doesn't bring those demons of expecting excellence, perfection, zero tolerance for failure. It doesn't take combat to instill those and make that part of your DNA. Those young guys who come out understand that, it wasn't combat that developed my brotherhood. It wasn't combat that developed my zero tolerance for inadequacy. That was the Marine Corps. That's what being a Marine is. It's about being a brother. It's about doing your job excellent. And the and so a lot of people say, well, this guy, he's struggling. He didn't even see combat. Let's go back to, we transformed you. We sustained that transformation. But when you leave, there's only certain people that really can still understand that. And it takes up picking the phone, takes talking, no amount of meds, no amount, it does, as we say, and where I live in small, it takes a village. It takes a village to raise a child. Well, it also takes your own village to help you continue to transition that walk. And for those of us who have, like myself, I've done well. I've done very well, and I still struggle. So what about the cat who didn't fall? His path hasn't been as good as mine. What I say to those guys is, talk to your brothers, talk to your priest, talk to your reverend, your whoever it is, but at the end of the day, your priest, he doesn't understand as well. The best people you can talk to are those guys who are living it. And we all live it. It just doesn't, it doesn't stop just because you left. And so, and I got to take my own advice, because there's, I still go dark. I still have my tough times. But my wife, she knows when I'm there. And typically it is, why don't you go up to 29 Palms, go visit, Jay, why don't you, get on a FaceTime, with Al, and I'm like, sometimes she reads those tea leaves much better than I do. She knows she doesn't have the answer, but she does know that those other people on the other end of the phones, they do have the answer. So that's probably my biggest thing is just, you just don't give up. That is never the answer, because, as much as bad as it feels, you're not alone.
So we got another generation coming through, and they need to hear examples of real life people tackling difficult environments and going through challenging things, and taking your story, taking the bridge as an example. How do you encourage them? How do you encourage the next generation to step up to challenges that might seem impossible, and to give it a try anyway, and to exercise a level of determination to accomplish great things?
Well, yeah, and again, as I have faith in, our Marines and Marine Corps, you got to have faith in the next generation, right? I'm sure every old Marine looked at the upcoming generation like, how are these guys going to do it? Well, the Marine Corps helps you do it. But, with this new generation, the struggle to getting to the 18, 19-year-old, it's a little tougher. Obviously, the challenges of social media, the challenges of that, if you speak your mind, you're bullying and creating a victim out of somebody, or even more that, at birth, you're a victim. That's not the case. We still need to build, and prepare, the youth, to be strong. Unfortunately, not every home still has a dad in it, but every classroom may, every school, every sports field. There's always if they don't approach, if it's not a coach approaching, then seek out that strong, role model, male, female role model that is there, and hopefully, don't let society, say you're a victim. If you didn't succeed in this one effort, you got to take ownership in that, but understand, just like those of us who were on that bridge at that time, we hit an obstacle. A decision could have been made as, oh, we're not going to cross it. We're just going to stay on this side and let someone else carry our weight. Well, in this today's society, it seems there's far and far few of, those men and women who hear the calling, who have the desire to, wear that eagle of an anchor, or be an airman, a sailor, a soldier, to go out there and pick up and carry on where we're at. And, at this point in life, it doesn't matter what color, what sex, what you identify with. At this point, I think, the one thing that this new generation has been able to do, where they've succumbed to this, is they're a much more accepting and they're not a bigoted group. That's a good positive that, that maybe when I grew up, we didn't see it, through the same eyes. But this next generation, they can fight side by side with their cohorts. It's a little different. I never had a female on a tank, so I can't speak to that. But now I can see where, in the Marine Corps, whether it's on an Amtrak or an LAV, where I am seeing females succeed and demonstrate that they still have the same, the same mental desire and physical capability to do the job. And we got to do that at a young age. I've always tried to, express to my children, especially my daughters, that, you don't need a man. You don't need a husband, right? You need you is what you need in regards to travel these, those formative years, especially, between in high school, because there's plenty of people who want to keep you down, and make you the victim. But but the ones that want to build you up and carry you, those are probably going to be the strongest influences you have in life. And they will always be there. The ones that kept you down, they will disappear once you leave your life. But the ones who have been there from the beginning, the ones to help you transition some of those tough times you have, what's going to be interesting, 10 years later, those same people are probably still in your life, where the other ones who always looked at a reason to make, try to justify that it wasn't your fault, or, it's just life, it's society's fault, they'll be gone. But those who are willing to put the time and the love and the care into you, they're going to be there for the rest of your life. And so that's what I'm saying. We need to, especially those of us that are still around, who were on that bridge, or who have traveled across the desert. We need to find our ways. How can we influence? How can we inject those lessons learned? For me, it was the football field, the rugby fields. That's how I did it. For another, it might be a Boy Scout, Girl Scout leader. For another one, it could be your drama teacher, could be your music teacher. The thing is, there's people like us who have overcome some of the toughest obstacles that you can put us anywhere and we're going to be able to thrive. And then, of course, and let's build up this new generation.
So, Erik, I need to hear a little bit more about how amazing your wife is. She's obviously a pretty incredible lady. And not only, starting a business, running a business, but running a household and taking care of all the things that need to be taken care of, while you and your buddies are out engaging in the Super Bowl of the Marine Corps, doing amazing things. She and other ladies like her, staying home and doing just phenomenal work. But Nicole's a pretty special lady. So I need you to brag on her a little bit.
Okay, absolutely. That's easy. All right, so what can never be forgotten is the support structure that we have at home. Our wives, our children. As I look back to my wife, I think on my last deployment, my son was born, and then 6 days later I deployed. I think about that, like, what other job in life would ask of an employee, of a person, to do that? And there is none. There is no other. There's always another firefighter to put the fire out. There's always another policeman to chase down a bad guy. But when it comes to, military deployments, when the call goes up, you have to answer it. It's in not that it's not an option to say, you know what, sir, I don't think I can go on this deployment. I guess you could say that, but a Marine doesn't. So, fortunately for me, and I can't say this has been to everyone, but my wife, she when I left, when my son Tank was 6 days old, she also had the twins who were just over 2 years old. And then my big girls who were in first and second grade at that time. And I remember preparing for that deployment. I had to teach the young ones how to do laundry because mom was already, mom was just done having a baby, and training them and making them into strong women. My wife as well, her role in helping the younger Marine wives, during that time was amazing. And, and I found it interesting because, as my daughter, she got married to a Marine, and she found herself as a young wife I was very impressed how my daughter, though, as stubborn and ahead as she was, that she was calling back, not to me, but back to my wife, to ask her how to deal with the struggles of her own, her own husband. How my husband's getting ready to deploy, and I just had this baby. Well, instantly she talks to dad. It's going to be like, you need to suck it up. Your brother was, but it was more of a nurturing, like, yeah, I had to deal with this. That's why when they say thank you to your service, thank you for your service, it's not just the military member, because it is a family. It is a family. If you are the older brother or the older sister, you have a responsibility to help mom out with the younger kids. So it is a family of service when it comes to that. Since then, my wife, has stood up an amazing business, and I believe it was the fact that she was managing young wives early on in my career, helped her to work with and manage, and to manage people now, as well as she deals with, obviously non-military members. Doesn't mean they don't have struggles, doesn't mean they don't have obstacles, but she definitely can talk to a younger wife who's not military, and when they're painting a picture, oh, my life sucks, or this is bad, she's like, my son was 6 days old when my husband left. I survived that. You can too survive this, and unfortunately, divorce is a big part. It is a big part, and the one thing I've always tried to tell these Marines that do go through divorces and stuff is that it's another obstacle, but it doesn't mean you can't be a great parent still. And sometimes that's the best thing. The best thing, to remove that negativity in the life, is horrible and sad as it is, but to, give a healthy, happy home to those children. And so that's, I'm very blessed that my wife and I, we've survived that, and that's a good thing. And my kids, hopefully they will see, the value and the advantages of having a complete home. But at the end of the day, you just got to drive home that, not everything is perfect. Not everything is perfect, but not everything is life-ending either.
Powerful. What's the name of the company that she owns?
District Model and Talent, where she gets a chance herself to mentor the youth in regards in transitioning. The youth and the parents, because if you have a child actor, that is that is as much of a tax on the parent, helping them chase that dream, and if and then that's the thing, if I can reflect back to one of the greatest pieces of advice I ever got. I was sitting in the airport next to a gentleman, and I was bragging about my son playing football, and the gentleman had brought to my attention that his son was playing in the NFL, played Division I college football. So I asked him, how did you get there? What advice would you give me as a young dad who's got I got a sixth grader who's playing football. He loves the sport. Feed the passion. He goes, feed the passion. He goes, as long as they're being a good kid, if they believe a new pair of shoes is going to make them run stronger, run faster, and be a better player, if they are doing well in school, figure out a way to feed that passion all the way up. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't work, just let them know that at the end of the day, you can look in that mirror and say, I gave it my all. I have no regrets. And the same thing as a parent, you can look in the mirror and say the same thing. You know what? I supported him from day one. However, if it didn't work out, I'm still here. I still love you.
All right, so I need to know from your perspective, what is it that makes tankers special? What is it about them, their training, the way that they do their business on a battlefield that's a little bit different than everybody else?
Well, okay, so, in life, right, you could always, once you're sitting back, you can reflect upon, if I could do something different, right? all those decisions, what would I do different, are prior to the Marine Corps. When I talk about my time in the Marine Corps, the one thing that I would never change would be the decision to be a tank, be a tank guy. I remember sitting in the recruiter's office, scored pretty well on the test, and they're like, you can go fix aircraft and everything. And I just looked, I said, I want to blow stuff up. That's what I want to do. And he looked at me, he's like, you can be an aircraft radio mechanic. And I'm like, no, I want to blow stuff up. And fortunately, there was a tanker in the recruiting office. And he's like, you need to talk to this guy. And I just saw this big, strong, nasty individual. He wasn't the guy on the poster. He had a nice fat mustache. He probably pushed the limits of the weight because he was a very big, strong man. He was loud. He was confident. And after about 1 minute of the conversation, I want to be Gunny Reynolds. He and what makes us, I think, so unique to all these other, every MOS in the Marine Corps will say they're the tightest, or this is we're a small community. We live in 10 cubic feet with 4 dudes, 10 cubic feet. And unlike others, 2 infantrymen may share a foxhole, but they get out of that foxhole and then walk amongst their 13-man squad. In a tank, I spent 7 months in a 10 cubic foot space with these 4 individuals. If there is no topic, there is no subject that is off limits. And, what is great, what makes it's the brotherhood. I mean, even when you're talking about platoon, our platoon is only 12 Marines big, or size. Lieutenant has to rely on his platoon sergeant. I've always said that in the tank community, that platoon sergeant, platoon commander relationship, that line is very blurred, because although the Marine Corps' answer of fraternization, officers are here, enlisted are here, in a tank platoon, if that was real, that poor lieutenant would never succeed. Because at that point, you figure that staff NCO is also mentoring him, not as being a Marine leader, but as also being a man, picking up that role where that lieutenant's father is left off and helping him and guiding him the way. So I think the most influential person in a young commander's life is that first platoon, because he's picking up that role of where either his dad finished or his coach in college finished. That next male role model is that platoon sergeant. So, and that relationship goes throughout time, because typically when that lieutenant gets married, that platoon sergeant is there. When that lieutenant has his first baby, you're usually the godfather, or you're holding the baby. You're in that waiting room, and that goes from the lieutenant all the way down to that driver. When my driver had his first baby, I am there. I demanded I'm within the first or second set of hands to hold on to that baby. Erik is a great first name that you should name your child after your greatest tank commander you ever had. But, and that's it. And those relationships, they're long, they last forever. And then again, hopefully later on down the road, when needed, you're there.
Erik, thank you so much, brother. It's been an honor. Hey, maybe we can get your gunner, Jeffries. Love if you can get with him rather than it be just the two of us talking. But I'd love to hear some stories that you guys would be able to tell if I put you guys in the same room together. How's that sound?
Throughout history, The Marine Corps has responded
the crises of the nation.
We have always been most ready.
when our country was least ready.
Marine Corps is just to fight.
And since 1775,
We have fulfilled that role with honor,
Courage.
and commitment.
Today, we pause to renew our promise to America.
your Marines will always be there.
When you need us.
Semper Fi.
Semper Fi.
Semper Fi.
Semper Fi.
Semper Fi.